Okay, Ben, I think we're ready to get started as soon as you are.
All right, thanks, Kristen. Good morning, everybody. I'm Ben Lloyd, President of the Board of Directors of the Harford Land Trust. And on behalf of our board, I'd like to welcome you to our 2022 annual meeting. So before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping announcements. During the meeting, you can use the chat feature to submit any questions for our panelists. Nina Depkin, our Outreach and Development Manager, will be monitoring the chat box for questions. Also, if you're unable to view the presentation or need to leave early, we will have the full meeting recorded and available for later viewing on the HLT YouTube page. We'll be distributing that link next week via email, so keep an eye out for that. So as I said, I'm Ben Lloyd, President of the Harford Land Trust. Just a little bit about me for those I haven't yet met. I've served on the board since 2008. I've served as president since 2014, and as most of you know, this is my last day as president. I'm proud to be a 9th generation Harford County resident, currently living in the Narsville area near beautiful Deer Creek with my wife Kala and our 6-year-old son Evan. When I first became president 8 years ago, I don't know that it was necessarily because the board thought I was the best person for the job, but more likely it was just because they knew I just didn't know how to say no. Although I may not have fully grasped what I was in for, certainly the daunting task of leading an organization with such an important mission was made easier by the help of a number of people. I want to express my gratitude to former Executive Director Peg Nyland and former Vice President Rick Post for all of their help early in my term. At a time when I was not only learning what I needed to do as president, but also learning what I needed to do as a new dad around that same time. So I certainly could not have juggled all those responsibilities without their help. I also want to thank my predecessors as president, Harry Webster and Ann Helton, for their support and counsel over the years. And finally, my thanks to our executive director, Kristen Kirkwood, for all that she continues to do to move the HLT forward. Speaking of moving the HLT forward, last year, the Harford Land Trust built upon the tremendous success of our role in acquiring Bellevue Farm in Oakington in 2020 and followed that up in early 2021 with the acquisition of over 900 acres of woodland in the Cresswell area adjoining I-95. In addition, we worked with landowners to place 3 properties under easement and finished the year with over 1,000 acres protected through our work. Somehow, in the midst of managing many land preservation projects, Kristen managed to onboard 2 new full-time staff members. And together, the 3 of them managed to literally pack everything up in the office and move a block up the street to a location that better suits our needs. And finally, over the last year, the HLT bolstered our reputation as the local authority on matters pertaining to land use and preservation. While we are not and never have been an advocacy organization, we do not hesitate to make our position known to both decision makers and to the public whenever a matter that directly relates to our mission is being considered. So as you'll see in our proposed slate of officers for 2022, the HLT is in very good hands. I'm thrilled that Tony McKnight, our longest serving board member, was willing to step up and serve as president. Nancy Ann Sayer, who is relatively new to our board, but who has been involved in the HLT for a long time, has been nominated to serve as vice president. She has experience with other local nonprofits and knows the community very well. I think she'll do a fantastic job. With longtime Secretary Joe Tyson's term ending, board member Scott Kirby is someone who has great attention to detail and has all the attributes we need to fill that role. And finally, our treasurer, Mike Zeller, has agreed to serve for another year, and he will continue to do a great job monitoring our finances and investments. So unless there are any objections from the membership, which you could yell out, but I wouldn't hear you, so you could, I guess, convey that in the chat box. I'm pleased to present to you the officers and board members for 2022. I know that they'll all do a great job and will continue to move the HLT forward. I'd like to thank outgoing board member and longtime secretary Joe Tyson for her many years of service. Joe and her husband Jeff have always been a key part of our Harvest Moon Committee, and she will be very hard to replace, although we all know she'll continue to be a strong supporter. And also board member Dan Krug is stepping down from the board after 2 terms. And we thank him for his many years of help, particularly in our Earth Day cleanups, and lending a hand, things like installing our new land signage and volunteering at many of our events. So with that said, it's now my honor and pleasure to turn it over to Hartford Land Trust President, Attorney McKnight.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Attorney, we can't see you though, so your video might not be on your, there you go. Go ahead, Attorney.
Ben has been a terrific president. He started with us as a volunteer way back in 2006. Actually, little known fact, he applied for the executive director position in 2006, fresh out of college, but Peg Nyland got the job. Ben subsequently did volunteer and, among other things, helped Peg by doing some writing for the newsletter. His talents, including a comfort level with financials, were apparent to then President Harry Webster, who shortly thereafter recruited Ben for the board. Ben's tenacity in resolving problems and the practical solutions he brought to bear helped the Land Trust navigate the dark days of the financial crisis of 2008. Interestingly, Peg says that if Ben had not added his voice to hers, the board never would have agreed to liquidate its investment portfolio in 2007 and park the funds in CDs, and the results for the Land Trust, had it failed to do so, would have been dire. When then President Harry Webster decided to step down in 2014, Ben was the standout candidate to replace him, and thus Ben's long and successful presidency was underway. It bears mentioning that when the Army came looking for a partner for its ACUB program, after having been turned down by the Nature Conservancy, it was Ben that convinced them that the Hartford Land Trust was up to the task. Yes, he's been a terrific president, quiet, steady, and effective. Sure you don't want to stay on, Ben? What the heck? Nothing succeeds like a successor, right? So here we go. Actually, we will be trying some slightly different things in the coming year. I'm a firm believer that the most effective advocate for land preservation is the land itself. Put another way, I can tell you that saving X property makes sense because it offers excellent wildlife habitat, or because protected lands require fewer government services than developed lands, or because it promotes clean water by buffering a stream, or as a local food source, or whatever. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to get most excited about preserving that property after you see it with your own eyes, walk on it, take in its natural beauty, absorb its human history, be dazzled by it. We got so much positive feedback after our outdoor event at Bellevue last year that we are convinced that most, if not all of you, are on the same page. So more of our outreach is going to be about letting the land dazzle you. To that end, our Harvest Moon event for this year will again be held outdoors on a spectacular protected property in Darlington. And we have some great ideas to reward our Bellevue Circle members with special trips to special places. And for that matter, we'd like to move the kayak poker run around, except now it's gotten so big and popular that we can't find any place else with sufficient parking. So to conclude, building on Ben's wonderful accomplishments in his 8 years as president, I think the future of the Hartford Land Trust looks bright. And it looks extra bright because a local girl of formidable talents chose to come back to Hartford County to raise her family. And so, for the executive director's report, here is Kristen.
Thank you, Attorney. I'm going to let Mike jump on before I get to my bit to talk a little bit about financials. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. Yeah, thanks, Kristen. I just want to give a quick update here on how Hartford Land Trust fared in 2021 financially. A little context: coming out of and still continuing to be in the pandemic, we started making a plan for what 2021 looked like, and it was it's kind of difficult to predict exactly how the year would go, but we're happy to report that outside of that prediction, our income was 34% higher than what we had estimated. And conversely, our expenses 7% below what we had predicted. A great point to note here is a renewed partnership. Harford Land Trust has had many successful projects with Aberdeen Proving Ground in the ACUB program over the past few years, and we've renewed that partnership for another 15 years to come. This will help the Land Trust be able to pursue projects in the southern part of Harford County to preserve more land. Also in our quiver are our investments. The Hageman Land Fund is part of our investments, and the stock market's been good to us over the past year. Between contributions and unrealized gains, our investments on the whole have increased by 34% from where they were in 2020. The largest portion of those investments is the Hageman Land Fund. $600,000 have been set aside for capital projects for land preservation. This is a 10% increase over the past year. So where these funds came from, the majority is through grants. Kristen's efforts to pursue and obtain grants for our operating expenses is 46% roughly at $233,000. The contributions of all of you on the call, the membership and gifts given by those that support Harford Land Trust is roughly $60,000, contributing to 11% of the sources of funding for 2021. The events put on, roughly $80,000, and a significant portion of our funding is from the benefit we got out of our investments at $133,000 or $130,000, roughly a quarter of the sources of funding for 2021. How do we put those funds to use? Well, the largest part of what we do is programming at $340,000. This is 90% of our expenses for 2021. Keeping the lights on, management and general expenses for Harford Land Trust to continue to operate is roughly 5%, $19,000. And fundraising efforts to continue to build up the finances for Harford Land Trust to continue to operate and pursue our mission is 5%, for a total of $372,000. I'd like to thank everybody for their contributions. That we would not be successful without all the efforts of the volunteers that we have and our membership as a whole. I'd like to give Kristen the opportunity to give a review of 2021. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Mike. And thanks to Ben and Turney as well for their warm welcomes. I'm behind the scenes here as well, so I can see all the attendees. And I just want to say it's really wonderful to see so many familiar names there. And there's also a few of you that I haven't met. So we're really excited to have both new members and old members on the call today. Hopefully next year we'll be able to see you all in person, share some coffee, some discussion, but we're so glad that you all chose to join us in this virtual format again this morning. So really, we're powered by people here at the Harford Land Trust. I feel so fortunate to have such wonderful board members, volunteers, and staff that can join me in this effort. As we noted, Nancy Ann Sayre was a board member who joined us in 2021, and she is now our new vice president. You can probably expect a few more board members to be joining in 2022. We're always looking to have some fresh faces on the board. Many times we have people join who've been involved with the Land Trust for some time, and oftentimes there's someone that comes with a special set of skills that we're really looking to have on the board. So if this is something that you're interested in, please let me know, or Turney or Nancy Ann know your interest in joining our board. We also have a variety of committees, and that's another way to get involved with us. As Ben noted, it was a big year for us in terms of staff growth. When I joined about 5 years ago, Peg Nyland had said to me right off the bat, that you're never going to be able to do this job with just one person. And boy, was she right. So I'm really thrilled to have two wonderful staff members joining me. Jackie Kane has a wealth of experience in environmental management and restoration. She's really grown into her role over the past year, and she now leads all of our stewardship efforts. The bulk of that is monitoring all of our conservation easements, which we do annually, but she's also leading our land management efforts for the properties that Hartford Land Trust owns. She also has a great background in grant writing, and so she's started to really grow in that role as well, and is part of the reason why we secured such great grants over the past year. She also led our woodland workshop series, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and a lot of our property cleanups. Nina Depkin joined our team in November as our outreach and development manager after more than a decade with the library system and library foundation in Hartford County. She's quickly taken the lead on Hartford Land Trust event planning and our day-to-day membership communication. If anyone has attended any of the library functions over the past few years, you know that Nina is very, very good at this sort of thing. And that leads us to the comments that Turney made that we're looking to do some new events, getting people outside and really providing you with new opportunities. And Nina is really driving that behind the scenes. Of course, our volunteers. We could not do this work without our volunteers. In both big and small ways, every single day, I am so blessed to see so many people that care about the Land Trust giving their time and their talents to our work. I should mention that Sharon Ashman, our longtime volunteer accountant, is stepping back after countless hours over many, many years. Anyone that knows much about bookkeeping, that's a lot of time behind the scenes. And Sharon has dutifully come in every single week for much longer than since I've been here. She predates me. And she was a big part of my transition into the role as executive director to really get a handle on our finances. So thank you, Sharon, for all of your time and your work. As Ben noted, we also have a new office. So this is a picture of our ribbon cutting in late January. We're at 22 West Pennsylvania Avenue. We are street level. And this is an office that suits us much better. It is much more visible. Already we're seeing a lot more people pop in. They're seeing our logo on the street and just coming in to say hi, to ask us about our work as well. We do have a more sizable conference room, and so we're looking forward to hosting more functions there. But I do want to say thank you as well to our board member, Judge Carr, as well as Jeff Close of the Street Hopkins Real Estate Group. They both really led the charge on helping us find a new office. We wanted certain things with the office, and of course, we were also cost conscious. And so the two of them on their own time volunteered to vet numerous properties for us in the Bel Air area. So thank you very much to Judge Carr and Jeff Close. I also want to say thank you to the various photographers and local artists who helped us decorate the office. If you haven't come by, please do pop in. The walls are decorated with local photography of the outdoors, as well as plein air art from numerous local artists. We also have wonderful greenery in there from Jeannie Schick, who is a local in Whiteford as well. Hopefully when the weather gets a little warmer, we plan to have certain open houses there so you can come see the office and learn a little bit more about our work. So now the numbers slide. We had very impressive numbers this year. I can say that this was the most acres preserved in any calendar year in Hartford Land Trust history at over 1,000 acres. And every year when we're adding more conservation easements to our portfolio, that means more monitoring. So this year we did successfully monitor over 1,800 acres of properties, and that's quite a lot of time, and each year that does grow. When Mike talked about our finances, we do maintain significant finances to ensure that every time we preserve a new property, we have the resources and the staff to make sure that we can look after that property. But some of this is a little hard to grasp until you start to talk about these real properties. So let's get to the big one. Stony Demonstration Forest, the Gray's Run Tract, as it is now called. This is an extremely exciting project. We talked a little bit about this at our last annual meeting because it had just happened, but this project was many, many years in the making. If you've ever driven north on 95 through Hartford County, there is a huge section of woodland on your left-hand side as you're going north, and you might never really thought about it because it's always just been there. But what I can say is that very much might not have been there had we not preserved this property. This is 905 acres. And there was a very unique situation that caused Hartford Land Trust to really have to step outside of our comfort zone, where the owner of this property, the LLC under which it was owned, went into bankruptcy. And the bankruptcy court, which was based out of Florida, then took charge and was going to liquidate the assets of this LLC, this property being the largest of those assets. So as soon as we got wind of it, we tried to get involved. We then learned very quickly that we had allies in that. The Maryland Department of Natural Resources, as well as the Conservation Fund, which is a very large national conservation nonprofit, were also interested in this piece of property. If you're familiar with the Cresswell area, you'll know that our only state forest was in that Cresswell area, and that was called Stony Demonstration Forest, where James Run runs just on the west side of it. It's a little over 300 acres, so it was one of the smaller state forests in the state of Maryland. So the Forest Service in Maryland had been very interested in this other piece. And while not adjacent to it, it's just a jog down the road. So this was a project that took us almost 2 years. There was tremendous ups and downs in this project, and it was very uncertain for a long time whether or not we would prevail. It was an expensive piece of property. It was a complicated transaction. And I can say that really what led to the success of this was the strong partnerships that we had with the state and the Conservation Fund. Each partner brought a different piece to that puzzle. And Hartford Land Trust's role was that local on-the-ground knowledge. Sometimes I felt like I would get a call, everyone would say jump, and we would jump. We would find the information that was needed, we would broker the partnerships locally that was needed, and we made sure that this transaction was a success. It is publicly open right now, but there is not many facilities there in terms of parking or trails, and the Forest Service are working on those things. And if you'd like to learn more, we're going to be hosting a virtual lunch and learn on March 29th of this year at noon. It'll be about 45 minutes, and that'll be where Hartford Land Trust and the Forest Service will be on the lunch and learn to tell you more about this transaction. I'll give you a little bit more insight into the ups and downs of how it happened, but more importantly, we'll talk about what's next and what you can expect on that property and how you can access it. But as Tony said, it's really about seeing and touching a property. So I have a brief 60-second video for you here that we made to show you where the property is and some of the features of the property. There were 4 other notable transactions that we worked on in 2021. So starting in the upper left-hand corner, the Blum property. So this is also known as Joshua's Meadows. It's very close to Heavenly Waters, just outside of the Bel Air town limits. We are extremely grateful to Annette Blum and her family who approached us about conserving this family property. This was a donated conservation easement to protect this very important buffer going into Heavenly Waters. It also includes a lovely historic home and a very interesting scenic viewpoint from the Bel Air area. Then moving over to the right, the Pitts property. This one was a couple years in the making as well. So the Pitts family, Edward Pitts and his children, were very interested in protecting their wooded property along Bynum Run. This is about 43 acres, and this is particularly notable because the family could have put up to 200 houses on that property, and there was significant developer interest to do so. But the Pitts family was extremely committed to seeing this beloved forested property stay open in this way. This has a very important buffer as well to Bynum Run. It's quite steep in some sections, and with the entire property being forested, it provides an important green infrastructure buffer to Bynum Run. Then the Bush River property. This one is a little hard to explain because it was very atypical for Hartford Land Trust. Harry Webster and Peg Nyland worked on this significantly before my time as executive director. You might see on the picture there looks like there's a solar field. So some of you are familiar with the BGE property down near Perryman and Sod Run, as it's called. So there is a very ecologically sensitive section along the Bush River there, which you can see in those red lines. And we worked with them for some time to find ways to conserve the property. Because of various difficulties being an energy producer, they were not able to put a permanent easement on the property. However, we reached a compromise where they did what's called a lot consolidation. So all of those red lines are now gone, and it's one large red parcel. And what that means is that should the use of the property ever change in the future, all of these small parcels cannot be resurrected. It is now forever one large property of 120 acres, meaning that certain structures and residences will never be built on that waterfront. So it's a great ecological win as well as a scenic win, because many of you who are boaters will know this as you go by. It's a beautiful open area, but that wasn't necessarily guaranteed unless these legacy lots were removed. And then the last one I'll talk about is the Welsenbach Farm. So this is a property that Hartford Land Trust has owned for some years. We preserved the western side of the farm, and then more recently the eastern side of the farm, and we were the owners of it. We completed a stream restoration on a section of the stream in the forest that was highly eroded. But this past year, we sold the property to the Isaac Walton League's Hartford County chapter. This is notable because the Isaac Walton League was being displaced from their longtime chapter house in the Abingdon area because of the I-95 toll lane expansion, and they were looking for a new home. It just so happened that our Welsenbach farm is adjacent to the large Bosley Conservancy, which is over 400 acres and managed by the Isaac Walton League. So this seemed like a perfect marriage to sell this to another conservation organization who could manage it in conjunction with their neighboring property. So this will soon be the home of the Isaac Walton League's Conservation and Education Center in Hartford County. They received a green bond over this past year to help them with the construction, and they're currently in the process of designing and permitting a new chapter house that will include some educational components, a laboratory for children, and a meeting space where the former farmhouse was once on Willoughby Beach Road. So we're very excited to see the progression of this. We do still hold a conservation easement on it and it is permanently preserved, meaning that the larger property cannot be developed. So the other thing we focused a lot on over the past year was just getting people outside. It was very evident in 2020 that this is what everyone was looking for. So many people were turning to the out of doors just for some peace and to get out of the house. And that didn't stop in 2021. So we wanted to capitalize on that. We put out as many opportunities as possible to get people outside. So some of the things that we did was we started with our Earth Day cleanups. We had a cleanup on Stony Forest, which I talked about. And while we don't own that, it was very clear from the Forest Service that with their limited staff, they were having trouble doing some cleanups. So we did an excellent roadside cleanup, and we're going to return to Stony Forest to help them again this year around Earth Day. We also had a cleanup on our Perryman Woods property. Then in May, we held an event we called Passport to Preservation. And this was a virtual event where we put out over 30 different activities in the county that you could do out of doors and asked people to do at least 21 of them in May. We had lots of photo submissions and we gave out prizes. And we've learned that these virtual do-it-yourself events really appeal to a lot of people who perhaps weren't interested or comfortable coming to larger group events. It also was wonderful for families who could do this on the weekend with their children. So we have some photos here of those Passport to Preservation participants. We found that a lot of the times these virtual events also brought in new people who'd never been part of the Hartford Land Trust or our events before, which was exciting. Then our Bellevue event. There are some photos here of what we called the Bellevue debut and celebration. That was a wonderful event in October where we had various partners come and lead activities in the morning for individuals to come and walk around the house, walk down to the water, and experience some of the exciting components of Bellevue, as it's not yet open to the public. We also in the evening that had a celebration under a tent, which was really well attended. And I have to say that the weather just made it for a fantastic event. As Turney noted, we received such positive feedback that we're going to try to do something similar to that this year. I have to, of course, mention our kayak poker run. We had so many people that were sad that we couldn't hold it 2 years ago. And so we were thrilled to be back at Flying Point Park in 2021. We had wonderful weather, over 100 paddlers, and another really fun day on the water. And then our woodland workshop series, we tried something new this year. A lot of times we get queries from people just looking for resources for certain activities to help manage their land. And oftentimes those questions relate to woodland. So we partnered with the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay and held a 4-part series last fall, which every single time we were oversubscribed. It was really exciting that we had that much interest in the county, and even some people come from neighboring counties to join the series as well. So we're looking to do more educational workshops like this with partners. Ben also mentioned some of the things that we've been doing to stand up for the land. Well, this isn't necessarily something that Hartford Land Trust always seeks out. It had become more and more important over the past few years that we use our voice when appropriate on certain issues relevant to them. And so some of the reasons that we're doing this is that it does build our community. It is really important to have those public champions in those elected positions and partnerships with individuals that understand land preservation and why it's important for the community. It does broaden our impact. As I noted, conservation partnerships are oftentimes really what gets the work done. So we need to have those strong conservation programs and public funds. And sometimes that does take explaining to various people that have say over those funds and programs why we need to continue this work. And then lastly, policy change. We do not write policy and we are not involved in the policy process. However, a lot of legislation does affect land use. And so increasingly, we have been vigilant over those policies or things that we're hearing that could affect our work. And I should also say on the last point here, that recently there is a new Association of Land Trusts in Maryland called Forever Maryland. And Hartford Land Trust is a member of Forever Maryland. And they do put out a policy platform each year that we have been watching that goes over legislation that could affect the work of land trusts. So that has been something, we're also building our knowledge on that, as well as supporting the work of Forever Maryland through that new association. Some particular issues of local note that we've been working on are around smart solar siting. There's a lot of discussion both locally and at the state level on where solar facilities should go. Of course, we think it can be a win-win in terms of protecting our natural resources and moving away from fossil fuels if we do that smartly. We've also been very involved in conversations around funding for farmland preservation in the county. So fundraising, this is an important part of what we do. And as Mike said, we want to thank many of you who are on the call today, as you are members and you are all part of our fundraising efforts. So membership was extremely strong last year. We had a 58% increase in contributions, which is wonderful, and a ton of new members, over 112. A lot of those new members did come through that Passport to Preservation activity that I talked about. We're really excited about building on that success. We did launch the Bellevue Circle. This is our giving circle for members and families supporting at the $1,000 and above level per year. And we were thrilled by how many people joined this last year. And we're hard at work putting together a couple of unique opportunities for those Bellevue Circle members to engage with Hartford Land Trust, learn more about our work, and get out on some really unique properties. We also started an annual sponsorship program. We were hearing feedback from a lot of our sponsors that they loved the work that we were doing, but wanted to be involved in more and maybe have that conversation earlier in the year. So those logos you see here are the annual sponsors from last year. And we're really, could not thank them enough, because that makes our engagement with them more meaningful. It's more efficient for their time and more efficient for our time. And we know that we can count on that sponsorship for all of our events that we're doing throughout the year. That leads us to our community award. I am really excited to talk about our conservation awardee for this year. So without further ado, we have awarded our conservation award to Brian Boat. This is Brian there with Ben Lloyd and Nancy Anser receiving his award just this week in our office. A lot of you know Brian, but I'll tell you a little bit about his background. He's a graduate of Bellaire High School and went to Washington College, receiving a bachelor's in biology. He is a full-time decoy carver with boat decoys in Churchville. So many of you may have seen him at different decoy events or doing demonstrations. But why we really wanted to award this to Brian was his volunteer service. It's a long list here, so get ready of all the things that Brian does. He is a volunteer with Ducks Unlimited, the Isaac Walton League, Stepping Stone Museum, Haverty Grace Decoy Museum, Otter Point Creek Alliance, Anita C. Light Estuary Center, the Bosley Conservancy, Hartford Land Trust, and Hartford County's Master Watershed Stewardship. He was among the first class of the watershed stewards in 2017, with his capstone being the installation of floating wetlands to improve water quality at a pond in Ladue Gardens. He is always present at just about any trash cleanup or stream testing or anything going on with the waterways. Particularly, I've noted when I'm going around the Otter Point Creek area that just about every single wood dock box has Brian's signature on it, and he's been involved with all of that. Also, for any of you that know Brian, he's just an extremely humble person, and I think he's a model for all of us in terms of our volunteer service. He truly believes in what he does. He's not looking for recognition, but that's all the more reason why we wanted to award him our conservation award this year. So thank you, Brian, for being such a friend of the land and a friend to all of us at Hartford Land Trust. So looking forward, we have a lot more work in store for this year. A couple of things that I want to note is that we do have a strategic plan. A lot of you might not be interested in reading it, and that's fine. It is on our website if you want to have a look at it. But why this is important is that we have to have a roadmap to tell us where to go. There are wonderful projects that come our way every single day, and we have to have a way to evaluate them and to know where to put our limited time and resources. So we're in the next phase of our new strategic plan. So our board met last year, and we're going to keep meeting this year and put together that new roadmap for the next 5 years. We're also in the process to National Land Trust accreditation. This is something that is extremely time consuming and paperwork heavy. But a mantra that I've been telling myself as we go through this is one that I heard recently and I really think rings true, is that we as an organization do not rise to the level of our ambitions, we fall to the level of our systems. So a lot of the important things that we've done are because we have the systems and structures internally to evaluate risk, know when to take it, and we have the systems in place to get that work done. So this is an important process. We'll be submitting a full application shortly, and we hope over the summer to hear that we've achieved that accreditation standard. Of course, land preservation and stewardship, this is something that we're always doing. We have numerous projects that we're working on right now that we're excited to start announcing throughout this year, and a lot of other irons in the fire. A lot of the work that we do is building relationships with landowners and waiting for the time to be right or the circumstances to be such that it's the right time for us to work with them and preserve their property. Of course, we're continuing our stewardship led by Jackie. And then lastly is community events. So as Turney noted, we're planning some pretty exciting opportunities to get out on some new private properties throughout this year. So please look out for those things. I'll leave you with our first success of 2022. Just a few weeks ago, we signed our first easement of the year on this beautiful small farm in Whitehall. I know this property well, and I'm extremely excited to see it be preserved. It is about 15 acres. It's where there's a lot of other preserved land on Hitchcock Road, very near Hartford Creamery. And the exciting thing too is that in addition to the preservation, the property will soon be changing hands, and a really, I would say a really cutting edge small farm enterprise is going to be coming to this property. So we're thrilled to add this to our portfolio. And thanks to the Groover family for their conservation easement donation. I'll also put a few save the dates out there. So as I mentioned, we have an opportunity coming up on March 29th for you to learn more about Stony Forest along with Hartford Land Trust and the Forest Service. We've also scheduled our Earth Day cleanup. So again, we'll be working in Perryman as well as at Stony Forest. And we're in talks with Hartford County Parks and Rec about expanding the Perryman cleanup, not just to include Hartford Land Trust, Perryman Woods owned property, but some of the other Parks and Rec lands in that area. And we have set a date for our kayak poker run. So please put on your calendar and save the date for July 16th. We'll be back again at Flying Point Park. We did look at a few other areas, but as Turney said, Flying Point Park is so ideal, has beautiful views, lots of parking. And so we'll make sure we change up the route so it's fun and new for everybody. That concludes my prepared remarks. So this is the time where we would love to welcome questions. We do have our team that's all looking at the chat box, so please go ahead and start to put any questions that you have in the chat box. I'll scroll up now and see if I can answer anything that has come across. So Harry's asking about letters of recommendation for the Land Trust Alliance accreditation process. Yes, Harry, as part of our efforts, we did send out, both in our newsletter and some other formats, a request for anybody to go ahead and submit some comments to the national body who will be reviewing us, the Land Trust Accreditation Commission. And so they do welcome that. Of course, we'd love you to say wonderful things about Hartford Land Trust in it. So you can contact me directly if you want some more information about how to provide commentary to that commission on our behalf. Randy Taylor, Senior Advisor in Haverty Grace, says, very helpful, great job, team. Thank you so much for joining, Randy. We appreciate that. All right, somebody has to ask us a question. We know we're under the hours. We've got a little bit of time. Okay, here we go. So Carol in Madonna says, Hartford County is blessed to have Hartford Land Trust. Thank you so much, Carol. And Rick down in Edgewood says, great job. In Edgewood and in Florida. That's right, Rick. And Alan Samuels asked about events where we can earn conservation volunteer hours. And I would say, do look out for those Earth Day cleanups. That's a great opportunity to get some service hours. Amy O'Neill is asking a little bit more about some of our finances. And so Amy, we do produce all of our 990s and financial statements. They are put on our website. So you can go ahead and pull those down. And if you want to dig into it any deeper, I'd be happy to sit with you and share our budget with you and some of the other elements of our financial management. Thanks for your kind words, Scott McDaniel. And yes, Scott will be helping us lead some exciting hikes. I did fail to mention one event that we're doing, and Scott just reminded me. So this year we launched what we're calling Take a Hike. So this is a program over the next 12 months where we're encouraging participants to take one hike every month for 12 months. And in addition to some prizes that we'll be awarding, we are going to offer some exclusive guided hikes for those participants to the Take a Hike program. And Scott McDaniel of the Susquehannock Wildlife Society has already volunteered to be the guide for some of those. So if you're interested in getting out on some new places with some excellent local guides, please do join our Take a Hike program. Robert Rudy asked, how does APG help Hartford Land Trust? So without getting too technical, the Department of Defense has a program where the various branches of service can enter into what's called a cooperative agreement with local land trusts. And so this is somewhere in between a contract and a grant. So it is a strong partnership. We have one of these cooperative agreements with Aberdeen Proving Ground, and we've had it for well over a decade now, and it was just renewed for the next 15 years. And so what that means is that they can obligate federal dollars to put onto that, and then we work together to identify properties of mutual interest, and we can both buy properties and buy conservation easements with those funds. Why APG is interested in this is that for the success of the mission at the base, they're very interested in not only what's happening inside of their borders, but outside. So incompatible development is what they call it, when there are certain things happening outside that could affect the mission. Of course, there's a lot of research and testing that goes on there. Anyone that lives near Aberdeen Proving Grounds certainly hears the large booms that go on. And so they do want to reduce things that happen right outside that could impair their mission. And particularly residences are oftentimes a problem. So we have identified certain large properties with big development potential that we'd both be interested in preserving, both for APG's mission, but because of the conservation potential. Additionally, anything that happens on the base, they do have to mitigate any environmental damage. And oftentimes that is by preserving properties just off of the base. So we do look for properties with certain environmental features that can then help APG mitigate things that are happening on base. Someone here has asked about, has Hartford Land Trust have any involvement with the Preserve Perryman Point project? I presume that you mean Perryman Peninsula. And so Perryman has been, I would say, at the heart of Hartford Land Trust since our very beginning. Our very first project that was completed in 1994 was the protection of the Forest Greens Perryman Lake Preserve. We've since done a lot of other projects in the Perryman area. We are a landowner there as well. And we're actively working with a few landowners on preserving their property in Perryman as well. So yes, we are very much aware of what's going on in Perryman, and I'm assuming this person is talking about some of the proposed warehouse development on the peninsula. So Hartford Land Trust, we do not join opposition coalitions for development. That being said, our model and our role is to have a very open door policy, meaning that we will talk to anyone who is interested, really, be it politicians, developers, communities, landowners, to explain to them what we do, why properties are important for conservation, the methods that they can conserve it, and the money that might be out there to help them do that. And we are actively working through all those channels as it relates to Perryman. Claire Herbert, who was our longtime staff person and intern, asked, do we have a succession plan for Sharon? So Sharon Ashman, our accountant, as I noted, is rolling off. And yes, we're very excited. We've secured the support of a local accountant, and we've been using them for the past 2 months. And also Nina Depkin, who's on our staff, has been filling a lot of those roles as well. So hopefully we're not missing a beat, but I think a lot of that owes to Sharon's excellent record keeping over her many years of service with us. Someone else here asked on planning for Bellevue. So we did have a lunch and learn in earlier February with Parks and Rec. So we shared a 15-minute video that we had produced about Bellevue. And then we also took questions and provided updates on what's going to happen next with Bellevue. That is on our YouTube page. So if you want to watch that recording of Parks and Rec giving some updates, that's probably the best place for it. They're in the master planning process. They are hiring various experts to provide them with information to then help create that master plan. But it is not just for Bellevue, it's for the entire Oakington Peninsula. There's a lot of land, over 1,200 acres now, owned by our Parks and Rec system. They're looking to create a new plan of how they can create recreation opportunities across all of that 1,200 acres. But in the update, they did say that unfortunately there is not a timeline yet for when public access will be available for Bellevue. But as soon as we know any of that, we'll certainly make sure our members know. Thank you, Chad Sherwods, for your well wishes there. And especially he is giving some big thanks to Ben, which I echo. Any other questions? And I see for anyone more that's interested in what we're doing with Aberdeen Proving Ground, Randy Taylor has provided a link in the chat box there that is more about what we call the Army Compatible Use Buffer Program, or ACUB, ACUB, and that's the program under which we work with Aberdeen Proving Ground. And during his tenure as General Taylor at the base, General Taylor was extremely supportive of our work there and really helped lay the groundwork for some of our recent successes, particularly at Bellevue and with Stony Forest, so thank you. Thanks, Michelle, for your well wishes also. Well, if there's no other questions, Ben or Turney or Mike, do you want to have any closing remarks?
Kristen, I think you've said it all.
Thank you very much. Well, our general information email is there on the screen. Also, you can find us on our website, on various social media channels. But please also do pop by our office. We are always available and really enjoy meeting members. So I just want to thank you all so much for taking a little bit of time on your Saturday morning. And we hope that next time we see you, it can be in person. So everyone have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much.